Hi, this is Attorney John Montague here. Recently, I've been working on a number of transactions in the early stage, and I've been noticing a trend, and that's what I'd like to call a safe side letter creep. Um, I think it's really important that the safe structure exists. I remember I was a young attorney in Gainesville, Florida, and there was a burgeoning and expanding startup scene. And I just kind of remember when the safe came out and how it was a little bit mind-blowing that they took a concept of a warrant and made this whole other instrument basically from scratch and the deep amount of respect for the people who worked on the safe structure. I think the problem with the safe isn't the safe itself, but it's these expansion of what we want to call these side letters. If you look at the original YC safe docs, it started off as just a simple pro rata agreement. But as things have evolved, and as safes have been used, in later and later financing with more money and additional sophisticated investors, I think there's been a creep on what is sort of an almost a debate as to what is industry standard for these side letters. So I would sort of like to clarify what I think is proper to include in a side letter and what I think is improper to include in a side letter. First thing I generally recommend is that the side letter should disappear whenever the safe converts and the entrepreneur enters into a price round. I think that's a really important function. If you are giving any rights, they should be temporary. So you can actually lay up the protective provisions for your price round, and they will be included in such protective provisions. So that's the number one main thing that I would recommend with respect to negotiating side letters. I think the pro rata right agreement that YC published is good, and offering preemptive rights with respect to the issuance of new safes on an as converted basis is also appropriate thing to include in the side letter. If you have a major investor who is leading the round, I think potentially even um, a board seat during the duration of the seat or better board observer makes a lot of sense. But I think, blocking rights and these protective provisions, which have seemingly creeped into these side letters, are not appropriate to include in an early stage side letter with respect to a safe. I think that's more appropriately negotiated in a price round because the whole concept of a safe, if we were to go back to it, is actually that we want to create a more efficient outcome for both the founder and the investor. And all these protective provisions are not intended to be negotiated at the safe level. They are actually intended to occur whenever the price round occurs. I do think participation rights make sense with respect to safes while the safe is outstanding, and that can also be applied to certain stock issuances. As I said, I think a board observer right makes sense, but short of those few things, maybe a most favored nation clause with respect to a safe and offering, although I'm sure some founders and investors will debate that as well. But other than that, we really want to try to keep these agreements simple because every investor seems to have their own terms with respect to side letters. And with, as you can imagine, with most favored nation clause, then it gets into this very complicated issue of stacking safes where you have to interpret different language of side letters, and it ends up just causing a lot of unnecessary admin work and BS down the road in a priced round, which is the whole thing that safes are trying to avoid. Um, so this is something that I've been thinking about more recently, as I think a lot of the negotiations and legal work have sort of shifted what used to be in price rounds, which would actually be my preference, into safes and side letters, and that seems to be the trend. Um, I think at some point I would like my firm, Montague Law, to publish some guidance and a sort of like middle of the road side letter that makes sense, that maybe has a little bit more meat than the safe pro rata agreement for investors, but is also entrepreneur friendly. But that's something I want to think about a little bit more. But these are some sort of tips when negotiating safes with investors. If you do have any questions and you want to have a free consult about the safe, feel free to just reach out to my website, montague.law, and type in safe video in the email, and I'll try to hook you up with a consultation on this issue. Hope everybody is gearing up for a great Thanksgiving, and thank you for watching the video.